All right, so just to recap last time, I don't know if you were here, Sarah, but we talked about some pretty amazing things. And mainly, we talked about this whole in the beginning, which has really stumped a lot of people throughout since forever. And part of what has stumped them, and you see this a lot in like Christian ideology, is that they hold so hard and fast to that written word. They don't believe in the oral tradition, which really kind of muddies the water. So they end up having these huge fights and debates with scientists when they come out. Now, even though, like Devorah points out, I think carbon dating will only bring you back how long, Devorah?
25,000 years.
Right. So when scientists come out and say the world is older than 6,000 years, and here's the proof of it. Now, granted, they can't prove it's millions and millions, but what they can prove is that it's older than 6,000. This really trips up a lot of people, and so their emunah starts to get a little, oh my gosh, like did Hashem make a mistake, Chas v'shalom?
The Torah is wrong.
Right, that the Torah is wrong, and so they start to lose emunah in that. So what we learned from the last time is that what the oral tradition teaches us is that in the beginning is really meaning to say in the beginning of. That something else happened, and as we were talking before about the previous generations, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of where we were leading
like
up to.
The 900 generations.
The 900 generations, right. Which really could account for an ice age, a stone age. Is it millions? Who knows? But to prove my point, I actually say, I didn't read the articles, but I kept them both because I wanted to just point it out to you. We started out this whole series literally saying that science is not an absolute, and they're constantly finding out new things. So there were two articles that I wanted you guys to know that literally, I think January 6th one came out and January 10th came out.
Of this year?
Of this year. So one says, recent discoveries have overhauled our picture of where humans came from and when. So that's a big...
Say that again slowly.
Recent discoveries have overhauled our picture of where humans come from and when.
And who wrote that?
It's an article that came out from Science, from a scientist.
I'm a little confused. We're talking about the time like this, like where it was written like in 7 days or 6 days, but each day is really like X number of years.
Right.
And that was already done. I went to a lecture many years ago.
Right, but we're talking about what the science. Right.
That's for Hashem. That's
right.
Not for us. When they say a day is like 1,000 years, that's only referring to God, not to us. So those people that say, I've heard that argument, that, it could be 1,000,000 years because what they're saying in the Torah, it's like one day could be 1,000 years. It's not true. That's a
So,
Well, what do
a
you
lot
mean?
of
What do you mean?
Goyim read the
But not the
Torah.
Goyim. I went to a Jewish.
No, but I'm saying,
Oh.
but a lot of Jews take their knowledge from what the Goyim or the scientists
Oh,
are
I
saying,
see. Okay.
and they read the Bible like what Esther's saying literally. But we have we have the Bible, but we also have the Talmud,
Okay.
which Lucy. So it's.
And the cliff notes. So it's like the cliff notes of it.
Yeah.
So the
what
second
does it
one,
say?
it caught my attention because I don't know. As soon as I say the first two words, you'll know why it caught my attention. Java Man, which we all, not so old after all.
I saw that one.
So
I saw that this week. I didn't read it.
So that's why I'm saying that I wanted to. I thought that was so brilliant that it gave those two articles, which even though I didn't read them at this time, because that's exactly what the Rav was saying in this book in the beginning, that we as Jews shouldn't feel so discombobulated and fall apart to pieces every time we hear something that almost seems to contradict what the Torah is saying. What the Rav is saying, just hold tight. You'll see that science is constantly changing what it knows, because it's only presenting its conclusion based upon the facts as they know it at that time.
I like the approach of it's not I'm right, you're wrong.
Right.
That it's like we can both be right, we just don't get it yet.
Right. Or sometimes it's just like literally like just take a pause. Sometimes again, if I tell you, Sarah, make this mathematical equation based upon these factors, you're going to come out with a certain answer. But if there were other factors that are also a reality and you didn't have that, you're not going to come out to the true sum of whatever it is. So that's kind of like what this Rav is saying, that just hold tight. The creator of the universe, he's not wrong. He wrote the manual. It's us that has to catch up to that. So that's where we were, and we were talking about tohu and bohu, which is another two words that come out of Bereshis that really, people have speculated what this means, and literally it's an upside down. When the flood came, that's literally what was happening. The ocean bed was being flung up, and the mountains were being flung down. And so you were literally seeing, we're going to go back where it says, you're literally seeing, and there's been reports of people who've gone up to the mountain. They said there's almost like sea matter, plant life that was like sea that's on the top of the mountains. And then you have like vice versa on the floor bed of the ocean. So it says the Midrash, Conan, and in the Beis Hamikdash 230-237 clearly shows that as we deduce, Tohu and Bohu are deep beneath the surface of the earth, for it cites the above quotation in the lengthy section describing the structure of the earth. We can learn the truth of our theory also from these paskim in Eov 9:5-8. God moves mountains while nobody knows and overturns them in his anger. He makes the earth shake from its place and its pillars crumble. He tells the sun not to shine and it complies. He seals off the light of the stars, who alone stretches out the heavens. When did these things happen? Now we know. So it says the Midrash in Bereshis Rabbah 10:2 verifies our propositions. The creation of the world can be compared to a public bath in whose floors were two fine mosaics. As long as the bath is filled with water, the artwork is not visible. When the water is drained, we can appreciate the mosaics. So too, as long as the world was tohu and bohu, the work of heaven and earth was not visible. When tohu and bohu were removed, the work of heaven and earth could be appreciated. So,
I'm sorry. Do we supposed to? I believe that whatever's in there is Hashem's way of making us understand what's going on. And even though the one day it's written, so you're saying because maybe from a lecture I went to, they didn't say anything as facts. Because they were trying to say everything's evolving, but that what's written is facts. What we know as facts, but there's some interpretations. But we're not. I don't think we're going to know anything until the Mashiach comes.
I think there's a lot that we do know. People
We
just
know
don't study.
because
They don't study.
Because it's written
Yeah.
in the Talmud, and there's a halacha that if the rabbis, the Torah scholars, sages, going back to the Talmud, that whatever they say in other words, their mouth is Hashem's mouth. So if they say this, then we as Jews have to believe it, follow it.
Okay. I never doubted anything so bad.
So the thing is, the truth has all been, it's there's a lot of truth out there. We like the common folk we just don't study it, so we don't know. Let me tell you, like I started to do the shots like this time around with everybody, and I'm like, so there's a lot of knowledge out there. We just have to make the time to, and everybody goes by what they like, like I like this, I like that, you like this, and you like that. And certain things that, attract me, certain parts of the Torah may not attract you. So it really depends on, what. So it says, the Midrash makes no sense until we apply the knowledge we have gained. For it assumes, as we have found, that Tohu is the water covering the earth at Maseh Bereshit. If that were not so, where does the Torah record the removal of Tohu and Bohu? But if, as we saw, the Tohu is the water cover, the Paschim...
I'm sorry.
Let me finish this. In Bereshis and Tehillim, we will see that in a later passage, do describe its removal. The parable shows, too, that the earth underlying the Tohu and Bohu and the heavens above it exist before the water cover, for only then does the analogy to the bath with the mosaics hit the mark. If we wish still to be skeptical of theory, we find it butt rested again in the Midrash in Tachum Yisro 14. When God sought to give the Torah, he first offered it all to the nations other than Israel, but they refused it. He wanted to return the world to its dimensions of water. When Israel accepted the Torah, the world was stabilized. What is a dimension of water? We can now recognize that the meaning, if Israel had not received the Torah at the last minute, God would have destroyed the world as it had previous one and not covered the earth with its own underground water. With what we have discovered, we can also comprehend an otherwise puzzling Gemara in Shabbos 88a. We read in the Torah, Yisro Shemos 19:17, they, meaning Israel, stood at the foot of the mountain, and that teaches us that God raised the mountain above their head and threatened them, if you accept the Torah, all is well, but if you don't, you'll be buried right here. So it says, they seem to deny the doctrine above in page 39, that the entire world would have ceased to exist if Israel had rejected the Torah. Moreover, this drasha appears to contradict the plain meaning of the Torah for the three paskim after the statement about standing at the bottom of the mountain. The Torah tells us, and Moshe ascended. There evidently was no gap preventing his ascent. There is no mention between the two statements of Israel agreeing to accept the Torah, which would cause God to put the mountain down again. That came afterwards. So moreover, the Hebrew words used in the narrative mean simply the foot of the mountain instead of underneath the mountain. So evidently the meaning of the Gemara is not that God physically lifted the mountain, rather he notified that the world was created for Torah, and the rejection of it after it had already been rejected by 70 other nations would mean that the world would be turned upside down as the previous worlds were, and they would instantly be buried under the mountain at which they stood, as we read Eov. So that also, if you think about it, like when you hear about that.
Happened today. It was an
It
avalanche.
looks like it's happening today. Looks like a repeat of history.
No, but I'm saying literally today there was an avalanche, and that's like.
What he's saying. I mean, I think what he was planning to do is a little more dramatic, but if you think about it, I don't know about you, but have you ever heard this? Because we hear this being read in certain parshas, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what did that look like? Hashem lifted a mountain? But what he said, here we go, this is another in the beginning of. This is another scenario just like that one, where it's not that he physically lifted the mountain, but what he was threatening them was that tohu and bohu again. I'll just destroy it all. If you don't want the Torah, there's no reason for existence, so I'll destroy it all and start again. So, that really puts things into a more oh, okay, that makes sense to me. But again, when you're taking it on face value, like many people do, you run into a lot of trouble there.
I sort of expect that a lot of it is metaphor.
I think, it is, but not only that, a lot of things get lost in translation because sometimes there are no equivalent in the English language for Hebrew words. And a lot of times that is first of all, that's one. Two, you got to also think about, to put it in the perspective of a Christian who has gotten this, the Torah translated by people who were, they had these real replacement ideologies. So they weren't so favorable to the Jews. They really felt like the Jews were a has-been and we're the new kids on the block. And so when they're reading these things, they're really, and they're taught the oral tradition is garbage, So you have to see it from that perspective. They're holding on. And in a way, we probably can learn something about emunah through their blind faith of what's not accurate. But a lot of people get tripped up in this literal interpretation of what the Torah is saying. And again, part of it is because there has been so many translations. The original translation, again, we start from there. And then from there, it went down and it just got watered down and watered down and watered down, and words started to change. The meaning started to change. And to be quite frank, some words were just cut off altogether that really make a big difference in what somebody is reading. So they have these fights, they stick to it, and then they're proven, the world is older than 6,000. and it really does hurt people's faith. And it's not just Christians, it also happens to Jews. It does. And a lot of time
They haven't proven the world is older than 6,000. So it hasn't been proven. And the
I think it was,
say we have to hold to the 6,000. Even like Rabbi.
but 6,000, I don't know who said that.
I thought it was more. I thought it
I
was
don't
all.
know, Rabbi Kesed? I don't know.
and
You'd have to
some
show
other
me that.
rabbis. Yeah. We are not to believe it's older than 6,000.
6,000 from Adam and Eve.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Adam
saying.
and
It
Eve
is
before.
older. It's from 6,000 from Adam and Eve.
Right.
There was something going on before.
So in other words,
Well,
so
yeah,
right, and so in
destruction
other
of what
words,
you're talking
time
about.
is being recorded as we know it from 6,000 Adam and Eve on. But there were things happening before. So that's Adam and Eve
Right.
starting. That starts the clock. So in other words, like even
No,
Abraham,
when Hashem created the earth.
the earth was already created. Remember, there was 900 and something generations before that.
Yeah.
So again, he's starting the clock
Mhm.
from this time. And if you notice, even when we get to Abraham, what is it like? I don't know if it's like 19 something, from creation. So what he's talking about is from that time. So there were things that were happening before, but from that time, this is how we count it. So again, that's also another thing that trips people up is the semantics of the words. But if you find that Rabbi Kasdan said something, please send it to me because I'd love to hear what he said about that.
Well, he says we're 6,000 years before, we're 210 years before Mashiach comes
Right.
at 6,000.
Right. The 6 days of
Minus- I
creation.
forgot what he's
Right.
minusing. He's
Well,
saying
we're talking about the
100
generation that ended up accepting the Torah. So you remember, the Gemara is
He's
clearly,
talking about from
the Gemara is
Bereshit.
clearly saying that's when he brought, again, in the beginning of. That's a separate sentence. Then we're talking about day 1. Then we're talking about day 2, which that's starting the clock.
Yeah, right.
But before that, there were
The other-
900,
yeah,
right.
the other I know what
Right.
you're saying.
So that's what I'm saying,
Yeah, we don't
that
know.
may be why
But
they're collecting.
Also, I'm not talking about that, I'm not like feeling that, but what I'm saying is that a lot of scientists believe the world is, let's say, 2 million or 10
Right.
million years old, because when they bring up the fossils,
Right.
the rabbis have said, the reason we have the fossils is because of the heat from the water from Noah's flood.
Right, and it's literally, and it's going to get into that.
Okay.
It's going to get into that, and it's going to get into that what the Mabul really means. Okay, so it says, God sent his hand unto the rocks, and he turned them over the mountains from their roots. Thus, immediately after the statement, they stood at the foot of the mountain. The Gemara follows with the drasha above, that the world was created with the stipulation that only if Yisrael accepted the Torah would the world survive. So because he knew that they would, that's why it starts the clock, or else we'd be 999 bottles of beer on the wall, Otherwise, it would turn to Tohu Bohu. We get further assistance from Moshe Rabbeinu, who declares in Tehillim 92, before the mountains were born and you gave birth to the earth and the world, from world to world, you are the God. So, again, that's another something that gets missed in translation when you're seeing that together, and you're talking about world to world.
What are they talking about?
Again, and so when you see these kind of play on
When
words,
were the mountains born?
Right.
When was that?
so this is what I'm saying. So this is what I'm saying, that
And
when
I read that somewhere, but I don't remember.
it's in Tehillim. So it's
So what year did Hashem make the mountain?
oh, I don't know if you read, like if you know that, like.
No, I heard it at some point. I don't remember.
So this is another thing, that whenever you see something in Tehillim, in the Torah, and it's like this play on words or a repeat or a duplicate, even the fact that somebody's name is mentioned, there's always something to be learned about that. So if you going through a parsha and something is like, it almost seems like a repeat and it really caught your attention, Hashem maybe wants to teach you something about that. Pay attention to it, hone in on it, and dig a little deeper, and you'll be surprised what he shows you. So it says, evidently there were multiple worlds before the birth of the mountains, the earth, and the whole world with which we are familiar. Another indication of truth of our thesis is the presentation of Maaseh Bereshit by David HaMelech in Tehillim 104, 2-9. God dons light like clothing. He stretches the heavens like a curtain. He builds his upper stories with beams of water. He makes clouds his vehicles. He travels on the wings of wind, and he makes spirits his agents. His servants a flaming fire. He established the earth on its foundation. It shall not collapse evermore. You covered the depths, this is Tohum, with its clothing. The water stood on the mountains. From your shout they fled. From the sound of your thunder they rushed. They climbed mountains. They descended valleys to the place that you established for them. You made a boundary that they shall not pass. They shall not return to cover the earth. So it says, David would not call the primeval waters Tohum if they had never been in the depths of the earth. Evidently they were. So the words you covered the depths as with clothing corresponds to the words in Bereshit. And the earth was Tohu and Bohu, and that state ended when the waters retreated down to the sea. Another substantiation of our ideas is evident in the Midrash in Tachum Bereshit 1. With the Torah, God sealed the Tohum so that it may not flood the earth. And that was what he did after Noah, which is why he put this rainbow. What could this mean? As we have seen, the acceptance of the study of Torah protects the world from calamity that befell the previous worlds, which is that Tohum submerged the surface of the earth. The Midrash is now perfectly clear. Another vindication of our views is found in Eov in 38:1-4-8. God answered Eov from the storm, saying, Where were you when I founded the earth? Tell me if you understand it. Who set its dimensions, if you know, or who drew its lines? On what were its foundation blocks sunk, or who threw its cornerstone? When the morning stars together sang, and all the angels shouted, who closed the sea with the doors as it emerged from the womb and came out? The Targum translates this last pasuk thus: He closed the sea with the doors as it emerged from the depths of the Tohum of the womb and came out. We see that Maaseh Bereshit, the sea emerged from the depths, which evidently were there beforehand. Shlomo Melech too writes in Mishlei 8:22-30, God acquired me, which it's in brackets the Torah, at the beginning of his way. Before his most ancient worlds, ever was I preeminent. At the beginning before the earth, when there were no tohumos, I was born. When there were no streams, sources of water, before the mountains were sunk, before the hills was I born. When he had not yet made the land and the outdoors and the first of the soils of the world, when he established the heavens, I was there. When I drew a circle on the face of the depths, when he hardened the heavens above, when he gave power to the streams originating in the depths, when he set the parameters of the sea, and water shall not transgress the word of his mouth. When he carved the foundations of the earth, I was reared by him. I was his daily plaything, entertaining him at all times. So we're going to finish up this page right here. It says, the description of the time when the Torah existed, but the earth did not, is puzzling. On what depths did God draw a circle if, as the Parsha previously declares, there were no depths? What heavens did he harden, as it states there were no heavens? To what sea did God establish parameters when there was no water? With what have we learned in this chapter? However, this Parsha is crystal clear. At one point, before the creation of the first world, there were no heavens, depths, and waters. The Torah dates from then. God created the first world, including depths, heavens, and waters. At the creation of the present world, however, they were already these things. So it says, at the time God hardened the heavens, that is, he set them at their present order. He drew a circle on the depths in order to build up the land. He dictated parameters to the pre-existing sea so that the land might cover part of the earth. How long did all these processes take? Apparently much less than we would expect, and the Gemara in Shabbos 88b refers to the Torah, a secret treasure that was hidden for 974 generations before the world was created. So we'll stop there, but we may get into this whole, who knows, maybe they know exactly how long it is, but this is,
I have no idea what they're talking about.
I'm a little
much.
confused about where pre-existing seas come from.
So in other words, when you open up in Bereshit, the water's already there.
Yeah, but he before that time, he was doing everything. He was
Right.
parting the water.
Right. So there was a time before that, because we get to the opening of Bereshit, because again, that in the beginning throws so many people off.
There's a lot of befores.
Right.
Not the beginning.
Right. It's the in the beginning of. If we would just have that word of.
Because he created worlds and destroyed them
Right.
before the earth
Right.
was existing.
Right.
He created, destroyed, like I don't know how many, 6 or
So I
7.
think that this part here, as we're all like perplexed about it, obviously perplexes a lot of people, which is why it's good to, like, I think, study it, you know, and hopefully Hashem gives us the clarity and all of that. But it's like very interesting. Again, if you take it at face value, you have a totally different understanding of how old the world is, you know, and this, that, and there was no Neanderthals, and how is that possible? You know, Adam and Eve were the first human. Where's the dinosaurs? Where's all these things? So, you know, again, it is all found in the Torah. We just have to know how to extract it. And a lot of things happen during this flood, and a lot of things just don't come back. Maybe unicorns are one of them. Yeah.
I know a lot of people in my family, they think like a lot, like I had this argument with my cousin about Darwin, you know, the evolution, and she says it's been proven because she learned it in college. And I said, but it's called theory. It's Darwin's
The theory
Yeah,
of
but-
evolution.
Yeah, because it's not
So it's
facts.
never been proven.
It's not facts. It's only.
And when you analyze it, it's the most ridiculous
But you still
way of
gotta
thinking.
know. Yeah, but you still gotta know it to know that there's other views out there. I
Right.
always believe that you have to know, because the more you know about other views. the
You know,
more
it's funny.
likely
I was
you
just
are
reading
to
something from the
think-
Rambam, and I gotta tell you, like, again, I think I've mentioned it before, especially in this day and age with so much information coming from everywhere and everything. I like to go back to the beginning, and he makes this advice, which is says, don't study. You're not to resemble them. You're not to dress as the goyim. Like, you don't study their philosophies, or like, because it just causes so much confusion, which is clear that we see that in this day and age. I've been around the block as far as like with Christianity, and you know, we have like some in-laws that are like Buddhists, and like, and we've heard like for years before I came back like to Judaism, like, and I'm telling you, like, this makes the most sense to me. It really does. Judaism just makes the most sense to me. It's like there's nothing like that oral tradition to kind of come in and explain what's going on. And again, it just, because if not, you really look at the Torah like a book of impossibilities, and how could that be possible? And why isn't it happening today? And yet it is happening all around us, like she said. Like, it's almost tohu and bohu happening again. And it happens more than, maybe not to the extent of Noah, but I think there's phenomena that are happening that have happened before. And so, who knows? Maybe that will, you know, with all these people saying that the Earth's going to end in like 6 weeks. Like,
How was your family in Puerto Rico?
thank God, you know, Hashem's got them on a really good setup.
Because I was worried about them.
They're in
Yeah.
a mountain, right?
Yeah, so they had power knocked out for like a day or two. You can follow this series, Mysteries of the Creation with Devorah Esther, on YouTube at Gimel Dalet 777. Click subscribe to be notified of upcoming shiurim. If you've enjoyed this video or know someone who would, please share it. Tziku limitzvot.